Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm noticing the day's getting a little shorter.
Yeah, cool. It's
but you know that's okay because my gosh, things are blooming around the yard and garden. Vegetables. I snuck a few of our first potatoes.
Oh, okay.
I didn't dig. Oh, nice. I didn't dig up the whole plant, right. But if you kind of dig down with your fingers, you can find some of the bigger tubers, borrow those off, and the plant will continue. So tonight we're having fresh potatoes.
Nice. How are you going to do them up?
Well,
Baking,
I think we're
going
to, along with burgers, we're going to dice them up and do fried potatoes. Or maybe on the grill, kind of fry them
That'd be great.
On the grill. I think, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that'll be really fun. And
how about you? How's everything going in your yard?
Things are going great. With more tomatoes are starting to turn, which is really great.
Have you had a ripe one yet?
We have, yeah. Some of the smaller ones. Some of the smaller ones.
You beat me. I planted ours Memorial Day towards the end of May, and we don't have a ripe tomato yet.
Yeah.
So you beat me.
And our squash plant, we've got a delicata squash, and we tried to, because we've got a small space, we tried to stake it so it grew up, and we've got kind of a frame around it, and that thing grows at least 1.5 feet every week. It's starting to flower, so it's very exciting. We're looking forward to seeing what happens. This is our first time trying to grow a squash, so this will be really fun.
Yes, it will.
Well, and so what we wanted to talk about, here we are, we're recording. It's the end of July. July has just kind of flown by, but we still have a lot of gardening left to do. And so in August, we've got kind of a checklist.
Yeah, August is a busy month. There's lots of things that we look forward to and can start kind of planning ahead. So yeah, August checklist around the yard and garden.
But first, you've got a question for something
I do.
To keep your eye out in the garden. Yes.
Joan wrote in, and by the way, thanks for everyone who does write in. Joan wrote in, she says, on my wood mulch is a blob of gooey pinkish tan material that looks like someone regurgitated on my landscape.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
No. Okay. Now, she did not send a picture, but I've gotten lots of emails about this, and many people have sent pictures, and I've seen the same thing on our own wood mulch. So maybe it's the wood mulch you have circling around a tree, or in your perennial garden if you haven't mulched with wood. This seems to be very common this year. Okay, and so as soon as she mentioned that term regurgitated, okay, what this is, this gooey blob, oftentimes it's maybe, 8 inches, 12 inches in kind of a semicircular blob laying down on your wood mulch. And the people that classify this type of thing, it kind of looks like a fungus, but it's actually an organism called a slime mold. And because of its appearance, the official name for this is dog vomit slime mold.
Well, that's very descriptive of it.
It's very descriptive. And so the good news is it's not harmful to plants, not harmful to pets, not harmful to humans. Very soon, it just dries up. After it has this gooey stage, it just dries up and withers away, and you'll never know it was there. So I just leave it alone. If it bothers a person, you could scoop it up, throw it in the trash. But anyway, a very interesting primitive type organism, not exactly a fungus, but a slime mold is what it's called.
Well, if people have questions for something that they see growing in their garden that they're not sure of, or if they have questions about how to treat something or how to grow something, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, Kinzler, at ndsu.edu.
Talking about mulch, my neighbor across the street lost a tree to Dutch elm, so they came by, cut it down a couple of weeks ago. Then the other day, they ground up the stump, and another neighbor got permission, and she went over there, and she was scooping up all of that, all the wood chunks. Any concern there about using wood chunks from, and these are small, of course, this whole thing had been shredded up, the stump. Any concerns about using something like that for mulch, or is that okay?
No concern at all, because any insects that that would happen to be lurking in that mulch. If the mulch is under a certain size in particles, the insects aren't in that. And so the foresters, the tree services are well aware that they need to grind up this wood material in relatively small shavings, and so that there can't be bigger chunks that an insect might be still harboring. And so whether it's trees that were affected by the elm ash borer, the emerald ash borer in especially other states, or the Dutch elm disease, as long as those shavings are small enough, the insects won't be in them.
And I suppose for something like that, because those shavings are so small, they break down quicker, so it might be actually really, really good for your garden.
Really good for your garden, or as a top mulch. What I like about the kind of shredded type mulch is that it nests together well. Actual wood chips tend to kind of float around a little bit. They just don't kind of mesh together and make a nice hard mulch the way that the shredded type material does.
Really suppress the weeds.
Exactly.
Great. All right, well, let's talk about our August checklist, things to do. But first, you've got a guest here.
We do. Samantha, and you go by Sam.
Yep.
Is with us. And Sam is interning in our NDSU Extension Cass County office. NDSU Extension offers intern positions. And so, Sam, you're interning kind of under the family and community wellness part in our office. So you've had a chance to experience a little bit of everything that Extension in a county office offers. Yeah. You were highly involved in the Red River Valley Fair. And so any comments yet on how the experience has been going?
It's going really well. I feel like I'm a little bit of here, there, and everywhere, both in what I know and what I know nothing about. So it's been a really good learning experience.
And of course, that's part of being an intern, is just sampling a lot of the things that go on in an office. So you kind of get the behind the scenes effect of what goes on. And so was your family gardeners? Many people are, some people aren't. How about your family like in gardening?
Oh, absolutely. We've had a massive garden. Well, big to me, I guess. Maybe not to you guys, but a real big garden in our backyard for as long as I can remember. And then a few years ago, we moved homes, and then that one also has quite a few apple trees. So another big garden and a lot of apple trees. So
nice. Of course, that's one of the August to-do things, is to check apples for when they're getting ripe. So that's kind of fun as well. Did you guys do, you mentioned vegetable gardens. How about flowers? Were you guys into much flower growing?
For the most part, all of our flowers stayed decorative and in pots just because of locations and all those kinds of things.
Pots and planters are very popular now.
And great. They're having a great year because we've gotten great sunlight and a lot of really good moisture. So things are going great.
Good. Yeah. So thanks again for joining us, Sam.
So with those, that's one of the things that we should talk about. Let's just jump right in there to our annuals. We can still fertilize, right?
Oh, we sure can. The annual flowers keep on blooming, especially the newer types. The newer types of annual flowers that are in our pots and planters and hang baskets were really specially developed to keep growing all summer long, but they need nutrition. And, I'm going to borrow a saying from, Tom and Mary Holm.
Mm-hmm.
Mary's joined us on podcasts, and her husband, Tom, does a wonderful job. And one of his statements is, if you want your pots and planters to grow like an elephant, you've got to feed them like an elephant. And in the middle of summer, they can start to run out of that nutrition. And so continuing to fertilize every week or so, I think, is really important. With a water-soluble type, I like the hose end feeders.
Okay.
They'll just go along and shouldn't really fertilize something that's bone dry. But sometimes if a pot or planter is dry, I'll water it first, kind of get the moisture in, and then followed up with the fertilizer. Or if it's a little bit moist, then go ahead and do your weekly fertilizing.
And these hose end sprayers, these are the ones that kind of screw onto the end of the hose. You go around and you spray. With that, though, you really still want to spray the soil, right? You want to spray.
That's a good point, John. Because the water-soluble types, and of course, Miracle Grow is certainly the most recognizable national brand. Miracle Grow and other water-soluble fertilizers have two ways in which they're absorbed by the plants. We all think of the roots, like you mentioned, direct that fertilizer down into the roots so the roots will take it on up. But plants can also take nutrition up through the leaves, through the pores, the stomates. And so that's why on the water-soluble types and the feeder, they will usually say, in addition to doing the roots, get some on the leaves because they'll absorb that. Two of the times of day that the fertilizer is taken up best in leaves is in the evening and also in the morning. Sometimes you maybe shouldn't get the foliage too wet in the evening. We've talked about leaf diseases going into night if things stay too wet. But morning, 7 a.m. or so, before a person heads to work, give them a good feeding. And so foliar feeding is what that is called as well.
I think the water soluble, one good note with that is having two dogs. Myself, we were doing granules and the dogs love getting into the granules. So I think we're going to switch to the water soluble for things that are in the ground that they can easily get to because they like to try to
that's a good point too, is why the water-soluble type are so effective is because, it's in a water solution, whereas the granular types, they're effective too. But the granular types need water to turn the granules into a solution, and then they're absorbed. So, that's kind of a good reason to, for the water-soluble type. You mentioned deadheading.
Yeah.
Deadheading. And of course, any of the annual flowers that start forming a seed pod, the reason for deadheading is to remove that developing seed pod. Otherwise, with an annual, it's expending a lot of energy, wasting energy, to produce seed. And we don't need the seed. We want them to keep blooming. Now, a lot of the new varieties of petunias are self-deadheading. They're called self-cleaning on the label. So the old flower will just kind of fall off, become kind of invisible. Many of them are sterile, so they don't start developing a seed. But if you, on hang baskets or planters, if you see developing seed heads, seed pods, remove them. The sooner the better. Because some of the varieties of petunias will certainly develop that. So it's not enough just to take off the withered little blossoms. You need to take off the part that they were attached to, because that part that's remaining is probably the seed pod. And geraniums, deadheading those, removing the old blossoms, cleans them up, makes them look nicer, but also then it encourages that plant to keep trying, keep blooming all summer long. So deadheading plus fertilizing are things very important in August, because a lot of these planters, they can still be blooming.
I was going to say, your geraniums can go a long
They can go
long
into
time.
October.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've enjoyed longer fall growing seasons. Of course, sometimes I'll still go out and throw blankets over these things because I just can't let go in the fall of the year. But sometimes if you protect them even from the first frost, you can enjoy some of these annual flowers well into October.
What about, one thing to kind of keep an eye on, this is the time of year, or we're coming up on the time of year, maybe you want to start making plans for digging and dividing.
Yes. And August, the fall time to dig and divide some of the perennials kind of starts in August with iris. August is traditionally the iris digging and dividing time. You can wait until towards Labor Day too, but August is the time when you could dig, divide iris. Now, every 3 or 4 years, iris do benefit from digging and dividing. If you don't dig and divide iris, they tend to get very open at the center of the clump. They get the iris kind of look like a bulb, but they're not a bulb. Bulbs are like onions and lilies. But they're actually a rhizome, kind of a thickened stem portion. So in the center of the clump, if you don't do anything, they start to die out in the center, and all the good parts are on the outer perimeter, and they just don't bloom as well. So every 3 to 4 years, a person digs up that clump and resets the parts from the outer perimeter. So you dig up the whole big clump, kind of separate out, and they come out in kind of natural divisions. You can kind of see the good clumps. And on each rhizome, the thickened stem, you choose, it's kind of a fan-shaped set of leaves. Then you trim those back, maybe about the height of your hand, size of your hand, and then replant. One thing that's important with iris is not to get them too deep.
Okay.
The actual true roots, kind of fibrous roots, are right below that thickened bulb-like rhizome. And so the roots themselves, fibrous roots, have to be down in the soil. But when you're all done, you should have that thickened rhizome just right at or slightly below soil surface. Especially in heavy clay soils, it can rot otherwise. So now, I've experimented. I thought, okay, with a big iris clump, what if you just dig kind of away part of it and leave part of it undisturbed? And it's much better, I've found, to dig up the whole clump because then it regenerates the whole clump. If you just dig away part of it, it seems the remaining older part just doesn't bloom that well. Also, this gives a good opportunity to get rid of any weeds.
Okay.
Weeds love to embed themselves down in the middle of a clump of iris or other perennials.
They're kind of protected that way.
Yep. And so if you dig up that whole clump of iris, then it gives you the chance to get rid of all the soil that's around. And getting rid of that soil also gets rid of the weeds and the thistle roots and everything else. I'm going to share a little trick that I use. An old wash tub or a tote would work well too. Fill it with water. After you dig up the big clump of iris, dunk that down in water. It gets rid of all the soil. You might have to just let it slowly disintegrate a little bit, but the soil gets away. I can see any dandelion roots that are kind of in there. And then also it will help to pull apart the divisions a little better. So on any perennials that I do dig and divide, I submerge them. I submerge the root ball down in water, kind of work it around a little bit, and that works really well. An old horticulturist taught me that.
When doing when replanting, after you dig and divide and you're going to replant, do iris want any kind of an additive in the soil? Because like you said, we can be kind of clay heavy here. Do they want anything like peat or anything like that?
Almost any perennials. When you look at the tag or description of almost any perennial, they almost all say that they like organic type soil. So whether it's a sandy type soil or heavy clay, almost any perennial will enjoy having organic material, compost, peat moss added into the soil. And that's a good time at planting to incorporate that into the soil because you kind of have that one chance until the perennials need dividing again.
All right. Well, let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about lawns.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back, and this week we're talking about we've got an August checklist, things to do as the summer is winding down to make sure your yard and garden are still looking good and give them really a good head start on winter. And that's one of the things that let's talk about with fertilization of the lawns, because that's really important to give them. You've always said that there are two big times that you for sure want to care for your lawn, that you really need to fertilize your lawn, and one of them's coming up.
Exactly. The first is around Memorial Day in May, and the second is around Labor Day. And, it's fascinating. Okay, I'm talking about lawns, but also perennials. It's fascinating how all these years and seasons go together. Now, the things that we do, the iris, that's building towards next year, the future years. And also the lawn, the things that we do now, in August and looking towards fall, that is preparing the lawn already to be healthy for next year. So many of the things that we do are not kind of instant things that, if I didn't get that done, well, that's too bad. But these things affect next year, future things. So in gardening, we're usually building already for the next year. That's why I never get down when the season looks like we're kind of winding down a little bit, because we're building these things for the future years already. So
think of it as an investment.
Boy, you got it. Yeah. And fertilizing lawn is an investment. So thinking ahead already to fertilizing lawns, either late August or early September, around Labor Day is the target date. And that's very important in the fall of the year. In fact, the turf researchers have said that if you were to fertilize one time of year, the fall fertilizer is more important than May.
Okay.
Sometimes we think, boy, in May our lawns are green enough, get some nutrition on. And sometimes after we've mowed many, many times during the summer, you kind of don't think about your lawn as much. But here's what happens in September when you fertilize your lawn. In the fall of the year, September, the days are starting to get short, and plants can sense that. And the temperatures start getting a little cooler at night. And moisture usually in September is adequate. And grass makes a tremendous amount of growth. Research has shown that in the fall of the year, September, that's when the majority of the root growth occurs in lawns. It starts sending a good deep root system, if it has enough nutrition, good deep root system, and then it can access the soil moisture better. And also, the fall of the year is when the grass plants start growing outward and filling in little gaps. But these things depend on the grass having enough nutrition. And, if it doesn't have enough nutrition, they're not going to do as much of that. So by fertilizing in fall, we provide that nutrition. Now, it's interesting, and I've got photos to prove it. A couple of years ago in September, fertilized around Labor Day, I ran out on a few little strips. Well, I thought, I'm not going to go to the hardware store and buy some more fertilizer just for that little strip. Well, the next spring, I could see black and white where I did not fertilize. And it wasn't just about green color. The unfertilized part was not as vigorous. It didn't look as good. So part of having a very healthy lawn is doing some of these seemingly small things over a period of time. Fertilizing Memorial Day, fertilizing Labor Day, mowing at the 3-inch height, doing things like that. As long as we're talking about the lawn, John, August is a time that we could do core aeration. Now, core aeration is where you can rent or have lawn service do it. That's where the machine goes over and lifts up little cores of soil out of the lawn. And then after it's done, you see these little cores. Sam, have you ever seen a lawn that's been core aerated?
I have not.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you're driving by, you say, oh gosh, they've got a bunch of little plugs of soil laying up on their
like
lawn.
little corks almost.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Good description. And what that does is it opens up the turf profile. For example, if it's a lawn that's had a lot of traffic on and it's compacted and the grass just isn't growing as well, core aeration, lifting up those little plugs of soil out of there, allows the air, the water, nutrients to get down into that soil. Or maybe you've got a buildup of thatch. Thatch is kind of that undecomposed layer right above the root system. And so core aeration can be done in August. We skipped the hot months. And, August things start kind of mellowing out a little bit. So we could do core aeration, and that can greatly help a lawn. If your lawn just isn't kind of looking the way it should, and core aeration is one thing that can be done to kind of wake that up a little bit. And lawn seeding. Many people, if they want to thicken up their lawn, they will core aerate first and then apply grass seed, because then the grass seed will get down into those little openings better. Oh, and Sam, you mentioned that you maybe haven't seen those core aeration. A common question is, when people are driving by and see that on a lawn, I've had people ask, gosh, we drove by and saw the neighbors did core aeration. Are you supposed to rake that stuff up afterwards? But no, the answer is no. You let all those little plugs just filter back in because they contain nutrients, microorganisms that are going to help the lawn. And so if you power rake a lawn, which brings up all this thatchy hay type material, that you do rake off and dispose of.
Get rid of that.
Yeah. So seeding, the fall is a great time to seed. End of August. Up until about September 15th. September 15th is considered the cutoff time for seeding a lawn. Maybe you got a new lawn. or spots that you're repairing or overseeding, September 15th is considered the cutoff date. If seeded at that time and with enough moisture, it will grow and establish enough before wintertime.
So if you're going to be seeding and you want to fertilize, what should you do first and how much space should you give between the two?
That's a good question, because if you seeded and you get those little new seedlings sprouting up and then you fertilize, the fertilizer could burn those tender little grass seedlings. But the national chains, the national brands, I should say, of lawn fertilizer have fertilizer that is specially formulated for newly seeded lawns. And it says right big in big bold print on the package, fertilizer for newly seeded lawns. And it is a fertilizer that will give nutrition, but it is not so potent that it'll burn the grass.
All right.
So you can kind of have your fertilizer and eat it too, I guess.
What do you think about weed and seed?
Weed and feed.
Weed and feed,
I'm not in favor of weed and feed. The reason for that is the weed and feed products, the fertilizer, yeah, that's great. But the weeding portion of that, in order to kill weeds, the little granules have to stick to actively growing weeds. And when you read the label, it indicates usually there should be some dew or moisture on the lawn so that those little granules will stick to the leaves. They have to stick on the weeds in order to kill them. And most of our lawns are not a carpet of weeds. You know, there's a weed here, one there, over there. And spot spraying is more effective, because since most of our lawns are not a carpet of weeds, it's really inefficient to carpet the lawn with a weed control product like that. Those weed control products like that, weed and feed, they don't do a good job of weed preventing. So they're meant to kill weeds that are already actively growing. And so they're expensive, and it can be a waste of herbicide. Yeah, we don't need all that excess herbicide flowing into our streams and ponds.
Is this a good time to be going after weeds? Or
it is.
Okay.
Yeah, the fall is the perfect time for weeds. Now, annual weeds, those that just pop up from seed, they're going to get zapped when we get our fall frost. But it's important not to let even annual weeds go to seed. Okay. But any of the perennial weeds, those that will come back from a winter hardy root, dandelions, thistles, well, they're probably two of the most common that we encounter. Perennial weeds like that, in the fall of the year, they're carrying material down into the root system so they can come back to haunt us next year. And if we apply herbicides in the fall of the year, September's a good month, maybe even end of August. If we apply herbicides at that time, those weeds will carry that material down into their root system quite effectively, more effectively than if you do it in the middle of summer. In the middle of summer, weeds get kind of tough and hardened up, and they're less likely to absorb things. So fall of the year is a good time. Creeping Charlie is another very hard to kill weed that can be more effectively controlled if you apply the product in the fall of the year.
And what do you want to be looking for in a weed killer? What should we be looking for on the bottle? So
if it's in a lawn weed herbicide, something that won't harm the grass but will kill broadleaf type of weeds. 2,4-D is common in many of those things. But if you have some hard to kill weeds, an active ingredient called triclopyr, Triclopyr, triclopyr is an active ingredient that has a little more teeth for hard to control weeds. So fall of the year is a good window to try to get some of these weeds. And even if they come back next spring in a weakened condition, you can reapply next spring. And hopefully then between the two, you'll really have those weeds suppressed. And so that works in the lawn. In a landscape, you need to target just the weeds because many of the things that will kill broadleaf weeds will also kill our perennials, trees, shrubs, because most of those are broadleaf as well.
So kind of target spraying.
Exactly, target spraying. And it's interesting. It may sound like a lot of work, but like in a landscape or perennial garden, if you have thistles, you can, with an eyedropper, you can drop a little bit down in the center of that weed. Maybe it's glyphosate, which is original Roundup and other brands, glyphosate. So you can target some of these just by a little target or using an old detergent bottle and squirting a little bit on that weed and being sure that you don't get it on the good plants.
All right, should we move on to trees?
Yes. Trees in the fall of the year, I always think plants are smart because in August here, as August approaches, I've noticed the days getting shorter. I maybe can't be outside until 10 o'clock at night. Now, maybe more towards 9, it's getting a little dim. Well, trees and other plants can sense that shortening day length. And trees, triggered by that shortening day, they know that winter is going to be coming. So they start kind of hunkering down a little. They start a slow progression into hardening off or toughening up. And so this is not really the time, either August or September or fall, is not really the time to do pruning on trees and shrubs. Sometimes pruning will stimulate a flush of growth, and that new growth doesn't have time to toughen up in time. And also, because the trees are starting to slow growth, they also don't heal over the pruning wounds the way that they do at the start of the season when those trees and shrubs are kicked into high growth, and at that time the cell division works well to heal them off. So there's really not a good reason to do any pruning in the late summer or fall. So it's best to delay until next spring. Not really good, and more chance of something going wrong with
I started that
pruning.
off by asking about trees, but that also holds for shrubs too, right?
It does.
Okay.
Yep, trees or shrubs. One thing I should mention, as long as we're talking trees or shrubs, it's a wonderful time to plant.
Yes.
Yes. Once we get past the heat of summer, fall is a wonderful time to plant trees, shrubs, many perennials. In fact, some perennials love being dug and divide in the fall. We talked iris, of course, beginning in kind of August, September. Peonies, look ahead towards September. That's the time. But any newly potted trees, shrubs, the fall is a great time. Late August, early September. So start looking around the locally owned garden centers. Start shopping again already. The target date is to have all trees and shrubs installed by about the end of September. Then they'll have a whole month of October. See, our soil in this area doesn't freeze down until about the first part of November, depending on each year. But if planted by the end of September, those trees, shrubs, perennials will have a whole month of nice warm soil to root in and get established. And you might think, well, is there any advantage to planting, late in the season? Should I just wait till next spring? Well, there is root growth that occurs. You might not get any more top growth because they're slowing down the top growth, but the roots continue to grow. So there are some advantages. So I love visiting the locally owned garden centers this time of year.
Well, one thing that like we started talking about at the beginning of the show, great time for tomatoes. But there's also, in addition to harvesting tomatoes, there's still some work to be done on your tomatoes, right?
There are, especially the indeterminate types. Tomatoes fit into two categories, growth-wise, how the plant habit is. Some varieties are determinate, and it always tells us on the tag or the plant description. Okay, some varieties are determinate. That means they're more bush-like. Kind of a stockier growth. The other class is called indeterminate. They just keep growing and growing. The way I remember that term is, indeterminate grows indiscriminately. They just keep growing and growing and growing. And at a certain point in summer or late summer, certain point maybe in August, any of that new growth is not going to have time to form flowers and fruits and get ripe fruit. So at a certain point in August, you may as well start cutting back those tops and let the plant concentrate on ripening everything that has already been set. So at a certain point in August, and that kind of varies with the year a little bit, but at some point in August, then start topping off the indeterminate types. Determinate, you don't need to do anything. They're going to ripen up most of what has been set.
Now, we've talked about this on the show. How many tomato plants do you have this year?
36, but 39.
How many are determinate versus indeterminate?
Let's see. The varieties, most of what I planted was Big Beef and Celebrity. Celebrity is determinate, Big Beef is indeterminate. And so I did about half and half.
Because you don't cage. And so I was
Correct.
wondering with the indeterminate, if they just get
The indeterminate are growing indiscriminately.
Yeah, so they are.
So I tried to space them enough.
Yes.
Okay, well, you can tell the difference in the garden because the determinants are in kind of their nice, neat mound. The indeterminants are always do kind of a jungle if you don't. And that's, of course, a good case for probably staking and caging. But I was able to devote enough space, so I'm just letting them produce their big mound.
Yeah. You're an old hand at this. We trust you. Oh, one of the things that while we still are in summer, sometimes we can really get some dry periods, and that can really cause trouble for tomatoes, right?
Oh, it can. Tomatoes, carrots, even potatoes. If we have dry periods and then get some rain, we can get cracking in, tomatoes. Have you ever seen a tomato where it's the skin is cracked like that? And carrots also. Sometimes when you go to dig them, they've got cracks that have formed, and potatoes will do the same thing. And that's often when there's been a dry period, and then we get a shot of good rain, or you water because you've been alarmed that it's been too dry. And then the tomato or the carrot or the potato has this burst of energy, and it literally bursts its britches. It bursts the skin and causes cracking. So the best thing we can do kind of this time of year when those things are really putting on some growth is to, and the fruit or the underground part is really growing, is to provide more uniform moisture. Mulch works really well to cut down the ups and downs and highs and lows of moisture.
All right. What about, so let's talk about potatoes a little bit. You talked earlier that you dug up a couple for dinner, but we really kind of want to hold off you really want to let them mature a little bit more, right? Ideally.
Exactly. I noticed when I kind of borrowed the potatoes off the underground out of the vine, the skins are very, very tender. It didn't take much at all, and the skin is kind of falling off. So potatoes are typically, the harvest is delayed until the plants have kind of died, turned brown, and the tubers then develop a normal skin on them that isn't going to bruise so easily. So potato harvest usually delayed kind of until as long as you can. I usually leave our potatoes in the ground until sometime in September, even late September. I try to dig them before we get fall rains that make our clay soil all gooey, and then the potatoes come out awfully sticky and clay. But I try to leave ours in as long as possible, and the skin then develops its kind of normal hardness, or I should say firmness, not easily bruised, and then also they tend to store better. So I leave our potatoes in. And also there's kind of a natural dormancy in a potato that they can remain in the ground for quite a while. They aren't going to resprout and start growing again. And so they have kind of a natural dormancy in that way. And there, until the vine totally dies, there is some enlargement in the potato tubers. Did you guys, Sam, grow potatoes?
Absolutely. That's one of my dad's only vegetables that he'll eat. So it was
awesome.
good to keep around.
That is. I always say digging potatoes is like digging buried treasure. You never know what you're going to get. And Sam, have you found too that, okay, I know potatoes are cheap in the grocery store. You can get a 5-pound bag for whatever, a 10-pound bag. But gosh, the homegrown potatoes are so good.
Oh, absolutely. Same with everything else in the garden. My mom is bringing me a load of fresh vegetables this weekend, so
nice.
I'm excited
I wonder what
for
she's
that.
Bringing.
I thought she said some
You'll find
zucchini
out, I
and
guess.
broccoli already.
Zucchini, yeah.
So,
Have to have zucchini.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what else did you say?
broccoli, I believe, is what's coming up this weekend.
Awesome. Some of those things just fresh from the garden to the table, that is good eating.
We just pulled up our radishes, and I'm wondering now we've got a big spot we could probably still get another crop
yes.
of something, right?
Yep,
What are
radishes.
some things that we could still plant and harvest yet
radishes,
this year?
lettuce, spinach. Some of those are only about 45 days from the time of seeding to the time of harvest. So this is a great time, especially as temperatures will tend to get a little cooler. The ground is nice and warm, so they're going to sprout quick, and give it adequate moisture so they'll sprout quickly. But lettuce, we're even trying string beans. That might be pushing it a little. But spinach, you can get a good crop. Kale, probably. And so, it's fun to have some of those things. In fact, some of the gardeners have said the best radish crops that they've ever had have been those that they plant at some point in August.
Okay. All right. What about squashes? What should we be watching for with our squashes? Because, like I was saying, ours are growing, but we haven't started seeing the fruit yet.
Yeah, well, hopefully that'll come pretty quick.
Yeah.
And for the gardeners that planted some of the things earlier, they might be seeing at a certain point, and maybe we're looking ahead towards the end of August, but this is a question that always comes, is on the buttercup type squash, when do I know when they're ripe enough to use? Okay, now our buttercup squash are still very, very green. They're still sizing up and growing. But, as we're thinking about our August to-do list, one of those things will be watching those buttercup type squash. Well, there's a couple things that you know when your buttercup squash is ripe. And one of those is when the skin has become hard, so it cannot be pierced by your thumbnail. Also, they develop kind of an orange spot, kind of on the underside of the buttercup squash. They'll develop an orange. And and buttercup squash can stay in the garden until the bitter end. A little bit of cool weather probably helps the sweetness. And so, one of the old sayings, when the frost is on the pumpkin, well, you can let the frost get on your buttercup type squash too. And even like the delicata squash that you had, you can let those go until kind of the very end of the season, unless you determine you want to harvest some of those when they're still a little younger.
Now, something that we didn't plant this year, but we're thinking about maybe doing next year. We heard good things about it. Onions. If you've got onions in the ground now, what should you be looking for, and how should you proceed?
Yes. So on onions, when do you start? When can you start digging or using? Well, actually, you could start digging using some right now if you want to. But the whole onion crop should wait until the majority of the tops have fallen over. You see, the neck starts to kind of wither a little bit on onions, and then the green tops start to topple over. So that'll be the first sign of that they're approaching some harvest time, is the tops will fall over, and then the tops will go from green to brown and start to wither. I like to leave the onions in the ground until the tops are totally brown and dry. Again, I try to time it before fall rains so that I get them dug before that, and then they go into the garage to cure, which helps them to dry down, and then they can store, depending on the variety. Do you know we are still using some onions that we've had just in dry storage, not in the freezer, but we're still using some that we planted last year from last year's crops. Yeah, there are certain varieties that will store about a year in dry storage. So those are the types that I like, because we like to store the onions. And so onions are a great crop too, almost like digging for treasure too when you go to dig those up.
All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about fall's maybe most anticipated crop, and that's the apple.
The apple crop, the apple harvest.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back. We're talking about having kind of an August and fall checklist. And one of the things we want to talk about is apples. Again, this is kind of the very anticipated fall harvest. Lots of things to do with apples. So you really want to make sure that your apples are going to be there, that they're going to deliver. What are the things that we should be looking at?
Interesting thing with apples in our area, there are some varieties that ripen in August and, good early apples like that. There are some that ripen in September and some that ripen in October. So many times people, if it's an older apple tree, don't know exactly what variety of apple they maybe have. But one key to knowing if your apples are ripe and ready to harvest is knowing what that cultivar name of apples were. Okay, for example, some apple varieties ripen in August. Hazen apple will ripen in August. Hazen apple will not cling onto the tree until October.
Okay.
It's going to drop and be all over the place and mushy by October. So an apple that ripens, a variety that ripens in August, is going to pretty much need to be picked and ripe in August, okay? A Honeycrisp that is that typically is in September sometime, maybe the end of September, that's not going to be ready in August. Haralson, a classic apple. Haralson, which we leave on the tree until probably October, they're not going to be ready in August. So anyway, each variety of apple, the named variety, has its window of ripeness, has kind of its month. So, okay, that's the first thing. Okay. Next, if you have no idea what your variety is, you don't know if it's an August apple or an October apple, there are ways to check the ripeness. Okay, the red color doesn't mean anything. The red color forms way before apples are ripe. So a person looks for what is called the background color, the non-red color. Okay, and most apple varieties, as they're starting to ripen, the background color turns from green to more of a creamy color, creamy yellow, maybe yellowish white on most varieties. So you look for the change in the background color. And maybe pick a few. Slice an apple open. Ripe apples, or those that are approaching ripeness, will have a shiny blackish brown seed. If the seed is still tan when you cut into it, then that apple is not ripe yet for that variety. Some of the apples will start falling off the tree when they're ripe, but that happens even before they're ripe. Sometimes apples just let go and fall off the trees. But when the crop is fully ripe, they'll start detaching from the tree. So apples, even if you didn't pick them, they're not going to cling on all winter. When that window of ripeness is there, whether it's August, September, October, they're going to start detaching in large numbers. And you can always sample an apple, taste it, see if it's a good, sweet apple. So again, there are ways to determine if those apples are ripe, even if you don't know. One thing, people will sometimes wonder if we bring in an apple sample, can you tell what it is? That's really, really hard. The shape, you can tell somewhat by the shape of an apple, somewhat, but it's really difficult to tell because they do vary a little bit from tree to tree. There was a person very good at identifying apples. Unfortunately, he passed away. And so it's really hard to tell what the apple variety is just from a sample itself.
Earlier in the show, we were saying that the August and September are still good times to be planting trees. If you planted an apple tree this fall or September, realistically, when would you be looking to be able to harvest some edible apples?
5 to 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and patience is our friend, like we've said oftentimes in podcasts. Patience is our friend. Now, some varieties, you might start getting an apple in 2 or 3 years, couple apples. We're also anxious for that first bite of a fresh apple. But really, the fruit tree producers, they physically remove any apples that form during the first 3-4 years because they want the energy to go into long-term production. So instead of the tree, a young tree, too young tree, wasting its energy on producing a few apples. They want that energy to go into tree growth, root growth, and the potential of a good crop. So the best thing we could do during the first 3-4 years on an apple tree is, grit your teeth and pull off any little apples when they're still dime size or before. And then 5 to 7 years, depending on the variety. In 5 to 7 years, it should be in full production. Some of the varieties like to test our patience. Honeycrisp has been known to wait 7 to 9 years. Hey, as long as we're talking about those, Honeycrisp, I've had people mention to me, how come the Honeycrisp that my neighbor gives me off of their tree is so much more flavorful and sweeter than those I buy at the grocery store? Well, some of the grocery store Honeycrisps, if they were produced on the West Coast and shipped in, on the West Coast, they don't get some of the cool fall temperatures we do, whereas here, Honeycrisp, if it stays on the tree late September, maybe even early October, the cool temperatures favor the buildup of flavor and sweetness in our apples. So our Honeycrisp apples, North Dakota, Minnesota, they're the cream of the crop. They'll be more flavorful than those that come in from other states. Sam, have you had Honeycrisp apple? Have you sampled Honeycrisp?
I have no idea. The trees are all over our yard. I don't know what they are.
Sure. And that's common. Lots of times, the tags get lost. And so, it's always interesting what people have grown. And of course, if it's an apple that doesn't really ripen up until kind of the end, Haralson was very popular. Haralson was developed in 1922. And, Haralson is still one of the apples for pie and things because they hold their substance well even under cooking.
What do you use the apples for in your yard?
We do a lot of making like apple pie filling, and then we will seal it and freeze it, or we can do applesauce and then we can that. All kinds of good options.
There's a lot of good things. Yeah, apples are there's a lot of things that you can do with them, a lot of fun things. I remember even like a couple times we would make smashed apples and mashed potatoes.
You're kidding.
Yeah. And it just kind of adds to the moisture there. It gets a little bit of sweet in there. It's kind of nice.
Well, it's a wonderful day. Count the day lost. You don't learn something new.
Yeah.
I did not know you could combine that. We'll try it.
I mean, I'm not sure if a lot of like high-end chefs would do that, but it's not a bad thing.
I have a feeling they might.
Yeah. Well, if listeners have any questions about what's happening in their yard, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu. And it's always great to hear from everyone.
And they should also, if possible, include photos.
Photos are always great.
Even if it's something slimy.
Yeah.
Even
if it's a slime mold.
Yes.
And share your successes. It's always fun. Or, if you have a tip or a way that you do things, always happy to hear it.
Please do share your successes because we'd love to see the pictures, and maybe we could even do a show about some of the great things that people have been growing this year.
Listeners' successes.
Yeah. That'd be great. Well, Sam, thanks a lot for stopping by today. It was really nice to meet you, and it's fun to hear about
Thanks for interning in our office. It's been a good summer. It's gone fast, hasn't it?
It has gone so fast. I don't think I'm quite ready to go back to school, but here we are.
All right. Well, Don, thanks again for coming in. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for listening.